For Victoria Vicky White, life at 44 had settled into a quiet, orderly rhythm. It was a rhythm born not of peace, but of necessity, a stark, rigid contrast to the chaos that had shattered her world over a decade earlier. She was the Assistant Director of Corrections at the Lauderdale County Jail in Alabama, a position she had earned through sheer, unrelenting dedication. Her uniform was her armor, the sterile, echoing halls of the jail her sanctuary. But it was a sanctuary she had built, brick by meticulous brick, from the ruins of a broken heart. This stillness, this obsessive order, was a defense mechanism honed harder than steel over many years. 11 years prior, in 2009, her life had been full of promise. She was engaged, actively planning a future that existed far beyond the cinder-block walls of her job. She dreamed of a home, perhaps children, and certainly a love that would fill the silence of her lonely nights. Then came the phone call. A stranger's voice on the line, speaking in cold, official terms, relayed a story of screeching tires and twisted metal. Her fiancé was gone, lost in the wreckage of a horrific car accident. The devastation was absolute. The future she had been carefully constructing evaporated in an instant. In the face of a grief so profound it threatened to swallow her whole, Vicky did the only thing she knew how. She worked. She poured every ounce of herself into her job. She took extra shifts, then more, until her life became a blur of 50, then 60-hour weeks. The jail became her entire world. Its rigid schedules and constant urgent demands were a welcome distraction from the deafening silence of her empty home. Her house was no longer a home, it was a museum of what might have been. But the jail? The jail was predictable. The rules were clear, good and evil, at least on paper, were clearly defined. There she was Officer White, an authority figure in control. At home, she was just Vicky, a woman drowning in solitude. This relentless, almost manic dedication did not go unnoticed. Promotions came. She was named Employee of the Year not once, but 4 separate times. She climbed the ladder with a relentless focus, each new rank a small, hollow victory against the loneliness that gnawed at her soul. By all accounts, she was a model officer, respected and admired by her colleagues. They saw her as strong, disciplined, and utterly devoted to her duty. But beneath the starched uniform and the professional demeanor, after 11 years, the ache of loss remained as raw as the day it happened. She had become an expert at managing criminals, but a complete failure at managing her own grief. Then, in 2020, a new inmate was transferred to the Lauderdale County Jail, and the quiet rhythm of Vicky's life was irrevocably broken. His name was Casey White. He was not like the other inmates she processed day in and day out. Casey was a man already shackled by a 75-year sentence for a litany of violent crimes, including home invasion and attempted murder. He was now in her facility awaiting trial for a separate, brutal murder for hire. His file screamed dangerous. He was a career criminal, a man the system had labeled as dangerous and beyond redemption. At 6'9", his physical presence alone was intimidating. But Vicky didn't see the monster described in the case files. For reasons only her lonely heart could explain, she saw something else. Perhaps it was a flicker of charisma in his eyes, or a raw, untamed intensity that cut through the gray monotony of her existence. Casey White, unlike others who looked at her with fear or detached respect, looked directly at her. And Casey, in turn, saw her. He saw past the assistant director to the woman beneath the uniform. He saw a woman who was, perhaps in her own way, as much a prisoner as he was. A connection formed, sparking to life in the most forbidden of environments. What started with lingering, stolen glances across the booking desk soon blossomed into a clandestine romance. They began communicating, passing secret notes like love-struck teenagers. Abusing her authority, Vicky began giving him special treatment, arranging for him to perform cleaning duties near her office just to steal a few brief moments of conversation. Soon, they were talking on a contraband phone he had somehow acquired. Their voices became a whispered secret in the dead of night. Casey spoke to her of the outside world, of freedom, of a future where no uniforms existed. Vicky, who had not felt such attention or passion in over a decade, was mesmerized. Their forbidden affair escalated. Whispers began to circulate among the inmates about Casey White's special privileges. Rumors of stolen moments in quiet corners and empty cells of the very institution she was sworn to uphold. For 2 years, this impossibly risky relationship continued, a dangerous secret kept hidden in plain sight. Officer White, the model employee, was in love with a convicted killer. By the spring of 2022, the stolen moments were no longer enough for Vicky. The brief, supervised interactions were a pale, frustrating imitation of the life she now craved. She was in love, consumed by a passion that defied all logic, law, and potential consequences. She wanted Casey for herself, free from the bars and the constant gnawing fear of discovery. And so, a desperate, audacious plan began to form in her mind. She would break him out. At first, it was a fantasy, a what-if whispered over their secret phone calls. But it quickly took on a terrifying reality. Vicky, the meticulous planner and rule follower, began to systematically dismantle her life. She put her house on the market, the home filled with the ghosts of the life that could have been, the final resting place of her lost fiancé. Selling it was cutting the last cord to her past. She methodically withdrew large sums of cash from her bank accounts, nearly $90,000, liquidating her entire life savings. She went on shopping sprees, not for herself, but for Casey. She bought him new clothes for his first days of freedom. She purchased a small arsenal, handguns and an AR-15 rifle, and a getaway car, an orange Ford Edge, to be their chariot. She quietly made other purchases too, things meant for a future she desperately wanted to believe in, a life of passion and intimacy that had long been absent. On April 28th, the day before she would set her plan in motion, she submitted her retirement papers. Her co-workers were stunned. Vicky, the woman who lived and breathed for the jail, was leaving? They hastily arranged a retirement party for the next morning, her last day. On the morning of April 29, 2022, Vicky White walked through the jail, accepting well wishes and slices of cake from the very people she was about to betray. She smiled, she thanked them, all while the adrenaline of her secret plan coursed through her veins. With practiced calm, she announced she was taking an inmate, Casey White, for a mental health evaluation at the courthouse. It was a complete fabrication. No evaluation was scheduled. But coming from the assistant director, the 4-time Employee of the Year, no one questioned it. Jail protocol explicitly stated that an inmate of Casey's risk level must be escorted by at least 2 armed officers. Vicky said she would handle it herself. Security footage captured the moment the plan was set in motion. Vicky, professional as ever, is seen escorting the towering, shackled figure of Casey White out of the building. But keen-eyed lawmen would later spot the critical flaw, the first undeniable sign of betrayal. She allowed Casey, a known violent offender, to walk behind her. It was a fatal breach of protocol, a signal that she was no longer his jailer, she was his accomplice. She walked him to her patrol car, and together, they drove away from the jail for the last time. A few blocks away, in a shopping center parking lot, her patrol car was abandoned. They switched into the orange Ford Edge she had stashed there, shed their jailhouse identities, and vanished. Back at the jail, hours ticked by. It wasn't until nearly 6 hours had passed that the alarm was truly raised. Vicky wasn't answering her phone. The courthouse had no record of a scheduled evaluation. A frantic search began. And when her abandoned patrol car was discovered, the grim reality set in. Vicky White hadn't been a hostage, she was an accomplice. The news exploded. The decorated ADC had run off with a convicted killer. A nationwide manhunt was launched, and with the crossing of state lines into Tennessee, the U.S. Marshals joined the chase. For 11 days, Vicky and Casey lived as ghosts. They knew they were the subjects of a media firestorm, their faces plastered on every news network. They ditched the now infamous Ford Edge in Tennessee and acquired a Ford F-150 pickup truck. They drove over 175 miles to Evansville, Indiana. There, at a car wash, they ditched the truck and paid a man cash for his gray Cadillac. They checked into a cheap motel, Motel 41, hoping to lay low, catch their breath, and plan their next move. Perhaps they dreamed of Canada or Mexico, or just a few more days of a normal life. But their time was running out. The critical mistake came at the car wash. A security camera captured a clear image of them and their new vehicle. The U.S. Marshals now knew what to look for: a gray Cadillac. A tip soon came in. The car was spotted parked at Motel 41. The fugitives were cornered. As law enforcement discreetly set up a perimeter, Vicky and Casey, perhaps sensing the closing net or simply by chance, emerged from their motel room and got back into the Cadillac. The moment they pulled onto the highway, the chase was on. A U.S. Marshal in an unmarked vehicle initiated a pursuit. Seeing no escape and needing to end the chase before it became a high-speed public danger, the Marshal executed a pit maneuver, ramming the Cadillac. The car was sent swerving off the road into a grassy ditch where it flipped violently onto its side. The dream was over. Surrounded with nowhere to run, Vicky sat in the wrecked vehicle. The future she had gambled everything for, her career, her reputation, her savings, her life, had evaporated into the flashing red and blue lights of police cruisers. The life she had so carefully built and then so recklessly destroyed was at its end. She faced the one thing she could not bear: returning to a jail, but this time as an inmate, to be processed in the same kind of facility she had once commanded. In that final, desperate moment, surrounded by the shouts of officers, Vicky White raised a pistol to her own head. The sharp crack of the gunshot was the story's tragic end. Police swarmed the vehicle and dragged a dazed Casey White from the wreckage. He was taken into custody without a fight, his brief taste of freedom gone. His subsequent mugshot showed a man defiant but defeated. Casey White was returned to Alabama, his mountain of legal troubles now even higher. He was charged with felony murder in connection with Vicky's death, under the legal principle that she died during the commission of his felony escape. Though he was not the one who pulled the trigger, the law held him responsible. He eventually pleaded guilty to the escape charge. Today, he sits in a maximum security prison, serving out his original 75-year sentence while awaiting trial for the murder for hire that first brought him to Vicky's jail. He is back where he started, a man confined by concrete and steel, left with only the memory of the decorated jailer who sacrificed everything for 11 days of freedom with him.